Hello, this is Mr. Gribble. I'm going to go through the process here of collecting or gathering the data and cleaning it up and getting it ready for use in our project, the Daylight project in trigonometry. And the steps that we're going to take are we're going to choose a place on Earth and we're going to find the latitude and longitude of that place. And then we're going to input that information into the U.S. Naval Observatory website. And it will give us a table of the amount of daylight in hours and minutes of every single day in the year 2019, or whichever year you're watching this video in. It updates every year. And so that's what we're going to do first, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the process. So the first step would be to choose a place on Earth. And I have already chosen like my favorite places. So I'm going to choose an interesting place, or a place that I find quite interesting. And that place is here in the Ukraine. And it's right about here. I'm gonna actually get real close to use a satellite a little bit further north. This is Chernobyl nuclear power plant. I find this to be a fascinating place. And so what I'm going to do is use these coordinates right here. So if you click just on a specific place on Google Maps, like that's listed, it's not going to give you, it's not going to be really easy to find what the coordinates are. So you're going to just click near it, like click near the place, and it's going to drop your own pin in there, and then like you can click on these. So I'm going to use this GPS coordinates. I'm going to put this over to the side of my screen so that I can open up another website now. And that website that I'm going to open up is, I hope I have it saved in here. Yeah, I do. Is the U.S. Naval Observatory Daylight Darkness Table. And the URL is there. It'll be in the description for this video, or you'll have access to it in some way or another. You can pause the video and type that URL into a browser right now. But we're going to scroll down a little bit on this page, and you'll see here there's a spot for me to enter a latitude and longitude. And these are these values here. Notice this one is north, so this is a latitude given to me. And this one here is for east, so this is a longitude. And this one actually asks for longitude first, and I'm east. I'm in the eastern hemisphere. Russia or Ukraine is in the eastern hemisphere. So if I hit east, I'm going to type in my my 30 degrees 30 degrees west, and notice like I have 49 minutes. So that 49, I'm going to round it up because I can't enter seconds on the website. So I'm going to round this 49 seconds up to 1 minute. So I'm going to make this not 5 minutes but 6. So I'm going to type 6 there. And then latitude, I'm in the northern hemisphere, so I got 51 degrees, that's 41, 51 degrees, 23 minutes. And then all I'm going to do is hit this compute table here. And it's going to give me all this data. And I want to do two things right now. I want to save, I'm going to write down this information somewhere, or copy paste it somewhere that you're not going to lose it. Because it will be useful for later when we actually write like the report for this. Then I'm going to select all the data in this website, and you can do that two different ways. You can hit Control A on your keyboard, that'll select everything on the site, or you can just copy, like drag your mouse over all the data. So drag from the bottom right to the top left, or from the top left to the bottom right, either way. And then hit copy, and you can hit Control C or copy, and then I'm going to paste that data into a notepad file. The easiest way to open notepad on a computer is to click on the Windows button here and type in notepad. And then we're going to paste that in. So you can hit Control V, or you can right click and paste, and this gives me this data here. We'll talk about what this data is once we get it into Excel, because for now we just want to save this. So I'm just going to file, save as, and I already did this one, so I'm going to do Daylight. I'll call this Daylight 2. So, and save it somewhere on your computer where you know where it is, so you can get it real quick. So I saved it as Daylight 2 in my Documents folder, and then I can close. I can minimize these or close these. I don't need these right now. Next thing I'm gonna do is open up Excel. So if we can do this the same way. If you if you have this search bar enabled, you can just type in Excel, or you can click the Windows key and just start typing Excel, and Excel will come up. And we're going to click it. If you have a shortcut to it, obviously you can just click that. I'm going to hit open, and I'm going to open the file that I saved. So mine, this isn't it, this is the other one. I'm going to go to this PC, and notice if I go into documents, the file's not there. The reason for that is Excel is looking for Excel files, and I just saved this document as a text file, which is usually Excel doesn't open. So I'm going to have to click this button here, Documents. And then instead of looking for all Excel files right here, I'm going to look for all files. And then there I can select my file I saved, Daylight 2. I'm going to hit open, and it gives me this pop-up. And in this pop-up, I'm just going to accept what is given to me. I'm going to say next, next, and finish. So here I have that same data that was in the text document in Excel. And what I'm really interested in primarily is all this data here. I don't really care about stuff above there because I know about, I copied down the GPS, I copied down the latitude and longitude earlier, and I know I'm for the year 2019. So I'm just going to delete all this data, and the way you can do that easily is if you mouse over the values over here on the left, you get this little arrow cursor. If you click and then drag down, then you can right click and delete. It's going to delete all those rows, everything in them. So let's talk about what this data represents. You can see this header and in these columns is HM. That's for hours and minutes, and the formatting is a little bit off, but what this is given to me here is that there was 7 hours and 57 minutes of daylight on January 1st of the year 2019, and it predicts using a function that on September 27th there will be 12 hours and 10 minutes of daylight. And as I'm doing this right now, it's October 2nd. So October 2nd right here, there was actually, because it's nighttime there now, but 11 hours and 35 minutes of daylight. So that's interesting. But if we were gonna want to plot this data, we want to see like how it looks visually, and if we really wanted to do that super accurately, the way we would have to do it is to make a one column go from all the way from 1 to 365. I'll go back up because I don't want to do that, and then I'm going to have to just keep pasting each corresponding day down. So I would make this go from 1 to 365. Cool thing is you can do that really easily with Excel. If you highlight enough cells to establish some kind of repeatable pattern, so 29, 30, 31, it's clearly going up by 1 every time. If I click this little grip, this green grip in the bottom of that selection, and then hold and drag down, like you'll see that it'll fill in as I go, and if I drag that all the way down to 365, I would have that. But I don't want that right now, because that's one option. And if you did want to set your data up that way, you could do that, and your answer, your final product for this project, will likely be more accurate than mine will, or than anybody's will who does the same method that I'm going to do here. And that method is I'm just going to find the average amount of daylight per day in a given month. So I'm going to find the average amount of daylight that happened in January here, and I'm going to find the average February. And we're going to use those values. Now, that might not be the best representation, and if you don't want to use that representation, then please don't. Maybe the best way to do it is to look at the smallest, or not the smallest necessarily, but how much daylight there was on the first day of every month. Or maybe you can get the median day, so like the middle day of January. I think that'd be between that'd be the 15th, I believe, right? So maybe we want to use this value instead. And so you could do that. This is up to you. But for me, for this one, I'm just going to compute an average, and it's really easy to use Excel to compute averages. What you have to do is write a function into a cell in Excel. So function means I'm going to hit equals, and now I'm ready to write in a function. And the function I'm going to use is the average function. And I want the average of every cell from this one to this one. So see, it put B5 to B35, and then you don't have to do this, but I'm going to close that parentheses out. And if I hit enter, it gives me that there was an average of 8 hours and 26 minutes of daylight on each day, on each day per day in January. Now I could do that same process for every column. I can hit equals and average. But again, a cool thing about Excel is if I want to have that formula or that function in all of these cells, but corresponding now, instead of for column B, I want it in column C, I could click on this little green grip again and drag it over, and I pretty much instantaneously just did 11 more calculations of average. So that's cool. Now what I want to do is kind of arrange this a little bit better. So I want to put basically here's what I want to do. I want to have these months. So if I copy these and I paste them like down here, I want to have these months and then these averages listed right here. And so, but I don't want the number of hours and minutes. I just want the number of hours. So we got to play around here, and I already know what I'm going to do here, but I'm going to show you the thought process maybe. If I just copy this and then I paste it right here, it's going to give me problems. And the reason it's going to give me problems here is because I did not just paste this value of 8 hours and 26 minutes into this cell. I pasted the formula, which was to find the average. And all I did was I just found the average of all the cells from P5 to P35, and if you'll notice there is no data there. And the average just adds up all the things and divides by the number of things. The number of things there, the number of data points is 0. So I have a divide by 0 error here. So this isn't right. Let's undo what I just did. There's a lot of different ways you can paste data in Excel. I'm gonna use this one. So if you right click, I'm gonna use this one, which is to paste values. Values is just taking straight up the numerical value of the cell. And if I do that, actually I'm gonna do it, so hold on, I'm gonna do that underneath these ones so you can see something here. If I paste the values, it gives me these, which means to say, this says that this 8 hours and 26 minutes is the same thing as this 0.352, but clearly they don't look the same. So we have to use our brains to figure out what this is talking about. And if you think about it enough, you'll realize that 8 hours and 26 minutes is 0.352061 of a day. So this right here is a percent of a day, or a fraction of a day. So if I were to multiply this fraction of a day by hours, by 24 hours, I would have just the number of hours in the day. And the reason that we have these different formats for the same thing is because if I go up to one of these data points and I right click and look at what format the cell is in, you'll see that it's in this custom format of hours and minutes. But then if I go down here and look at this one and I see what format this cell is in, it's just a number, just like just a value. And so if I change this, if I went custom and then down to hours and minutes, it's gonna go back to the same way I had it, this is not what I want. So I'm gonna undo that. So what I want in these cells is 24 times these cells. However, if I just do a straight mathematical computation, if I take this cell and multiply it by 24, the value it's using for B37 is the value. It's not 8 hours and 26 minutes. So if I hit enter here, it gives me, well, actually, I guess it kind of is. It gives me this 10 hours and 47 minutes, which is not accurate. But I want to drag this data over. And now because that's going to do that same calculation for all those cells. If I right click now, format the cells, and change them to general, there it's now giving me the number of hours. If I could have done that by just taking these values and multiplying by 24. I wouldn't have had to change the format. So now what I have here is all the months listed out, and then the average number of hours of daylight per day for that month. So if I want to, now this is the data we're going to use for what we're going to do in this class. If you wanted to do like the first day of the month, or if you wanted to do the last day of the month or the middle day of the month instead of the average, then you're very welcome to do that. If you want to list out every single day and use 365 data points, I would really applaud that, and I'd be really interested to see how different your final function is compared to if you use the same data but instead you use the averages. So for the same place, like what's the difference between the two functions you generate? Real quick, just to show you what some of the things we can do here is if we highlight all this data and I want to visualize it, I can use a scatter plot. So I go up to insert and I'm going to use a scatter plot, which is this one, and I hit this here, and you can see right away that this looks like a negative cosine function. Now there's a lot going on here that we'll talk about in the next video. It's not as simple as saying that this is the minimum value and this is the maximum value. In fact, if we want to know of all this data which one's the minimum, there's another really easy to use function that we can do. We hit equals and then minimum, and then we're gonna highlight all the cells that we want to find the minimum value in, which would be all of these ones. And it turns out that the minimum value is 7 hours and 51 minutes of daylight. So the shortest daylight day of the year, there's only 7 hours and 51 minutes of daylight. On the other hand, if I want to know what was the maximum amount of daylight, I would do the same thing, but this function is a max, and I do the same, highlight all those cells. So that's a lot of daylight. 16 hours and 37 minutes of daylight is only dark. It's only like nighttime for less than 7 hours, or no, 7.5 hours, like 7 hours and 23 minutes. And then also, the other cool thing is if you want to see where does this 751 correspond to, well, it looks like, so these are 757, so this is the beginning of January. If I go back to the end of December, look, these dates in December had the lowest amount of daylight. Interesting. And then it looks like these dates here in June had the most amount of daylight. Now, it doesn't give me seconds, so I don't know exactly what the difference is here, but there's something called, there are certain times of the year that constant throughout the world where you're going to have one day of the year that has, if you're in the northern hemisphere, the least amount of sunlight or daylight, and in the southern hemisphere at the same time the most amount of daylight. And then vice versa, you'll have another time of the year where you have the most amount of daylight in the northern hemisphere and the least in the southern. And so what is that thing called, and is there a standard date every year that happens for every place on Earth? The answer to both of those questions is yes. And so that's something we'll have to consider when we talk about stuff like phase shifts, when we come up with this function. But that's enough for now. We'll get into that stuff in the next video.